Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly fascinating, honestly kind of provocative spiritual framework from an author named Xu Feng. It's called Enemies Are Benefactors, The Path of Repaying Debts. Whether you're a longtime student of spiritual philosophy or you're just curious about the different ways humans make sense of struggle, well, you're in for a treat. This text offers a radically different lens for viewing our lives, and we're going to walk through the logic of this highly unique worldview step by step, straight from the source material.
Okay, let's kick things off by asking a universal question that the author poses right out of the gate. Why do we end up in our current situations? Like, why are we born into specific families? And why do we so often feel completely powerless against destiny? Like we're just leaves drifting in the wind? Well, according to the author, this feeling of randomness, it's just an illusion.
To answer that, the source material lays out our existence in incredibly stark terms. According to this philosophy, life is purely and simply a process of paying off past ledgers. The author states that if we didn't owe karmic debts from our past words and actions, we just literally wouldn't be here. Our physical existence is, essentially, a giant cosmic debt collection process.
To really grasp how this works, we'll be looking at the universal balance sheet, masters of debt repayment, debts to the universe, the interpersonal ledger, the enemy paradox, and finally, achieving the Tao.
Starting us off with Part 1, the universal balance sheet, where you reap exactly what you sow.
The foundational premise here is that the universe operates as a perfectly balanced, completely escapable accounting system. The text argues that the Tao of the greatest creator sees absolutely everything with perfect clarity. So everything we experience today, whether that's immense prosperity or really deep suffering, stems directly from the seeds we planted in the past. There are no accidents here. Every single interaction is just the universe balancing the cosmic books with absolute, meticulous precision.
Moving to Section 2, Masters of Debt Repayment, focusing on historical and mythological examples.
To prove that life is entirely about settling these accounts, the author points to revered historical and mythological figures who actually mastered the art of paying what they owed. It's a brilliant way to show the universality of the argument. For instance, Jesus is cited as having repaid his debts by sacrificing his blood to atone for his disciples. Buddhist Shakyamuni spent decades enlightening sinners to fill the universe with merit. Looking at Chinese mythology, Neja tore out his own bones to repay the debt to his parents, and Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, endured 81 grueling trials to repay the monk who saved him. The point the author is making is that these figures achieved their divine status precisely because they zeroed out their earthly debts.
That brings us to Part 3, Debts to the Universe, or what we can call the macro ledger. So if life is all about repaying debts, who exactly do we owe? Well, the text maps out our macro debts by assigning very specific, very pragmatic repayment methods to overarching creditors. Take nature, which gives us vitality. The repayment is simple. Be grateful and don't spoil it. Society protects us with laws, so the text says we repay that debt by avoiding opposition to the government. We owe our life to the greatest creator, which we repay by following their way. We owe our physical bodies to our parents, repaid by dutifully honoring them. And lastly, if we're guided by an enlightened master, we owe them our gratitude. These are the big, overarching accounts we absolutely have to balance.
Now let's zoom in a bit for Section 4, the interpersonal ledger, paying off those microdebts.
While the macro debts might seem pretty straightforward, this philosophy gets deeply provocative when we apply it to our personal relationships. The author lays out incredibly specific and honestly sometimes very demanding ways to zero out the micro debts we owe the people closest to us. For spouses, we're told to endure their frustrations and give them maximum freedom. Children, they're described literally as creditors by nature, born just to collect their debts. So we have to give to them wholeheartedly without expecting a single thing in return. For siblings and strangers, we must never take advantage of them. And importantly, this whole system extends to animals. We can't mistreat them, and if we do eat them, the text explicitly instructs us to pray for their liberation from the cycle of reincarnation.
Now here is where it gets really radical. The text suggests that if your spouse is unfaithful, which is referred to in the text as wearing a green hat, you shouldn't hold a grudge or seek retribution. Actually, wait for it, you should feel joyful. I know, right? But why? Because according to this specific framework, that infidelity signifies that a massive cosmic debt has just been officially canceled. You are now completely freed up to follow your own spiritual path without being tied down by that particular ledger anymore.
When we look at our wider circle of friends and strangers, the framework uses wonderfully colorful proverbs. Just listen to this quote.
Taking advantage of others is harmful, just like radishes are just vegetables. It's this slightly humorous, very matter-of-fact way of reminding us that trying to score a free lunch or taking advantage of a relative only creates a brand new debt on your cosmic balance sheet. The text insists over and over that it's always better to give more than to receive.
It's genuinely fascinating how the author completely reframes everyday human pain. Normally, if you have unruly or ungrateful children, society views that as a tragedy. But this text, it argues that the less filial your children are, the more thoroughly you are actually repaying your cosmic debts to them. It goes even further. Dying in poverty or obscurity is completely reframed as a massive victory. The text states that the humbler our death, the more honorable our life, because it means we have successfully emptied our spiritual accounts. We owe nothing.
And that perfectly sets up Section 5, the enemy paradox, flipping the script on adversity.
So we arrive at the absolute climax, and arguably the most counterintuitive twist of this entire philosophy. Traditionally, we view benefactors as good and enemies as bad, but Xu Feng completely flips the script here. He argues that benefactors, the people who help us and are kind to us, they actually bind us to the mortal world. They do this by creating new debts of gratitude that we are now obligated to pay back. Enemies, on the other hand, the people who oppress and abuse us, they're actually our saviors, because by wronging us, they're actively helping us burn through and cancel our existing karmic debts, which is what allows us to finally break free. This leads straight into a quote that really sits at the heart of this whole framework. Good is evil and evil is good. Without others' evil, we cannot achieve our own goodness. According to the text, the more foolish, abusive, or tormenting people you encounter in your life, the more opportunities you're literally being handed to transcend. Think about it. The next time someone cuts you off in traffic or completely wrongs you, under this framework, you aren't just a victim. You are actively achieving enlightenment by simply accepting it.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 6, Achieving the Tao, the Ultimate Goal.
Bringing all of these threads together, what's the ultimate endgame of this grueling process? The framework concludes with this incredibly powerful summation. By continuously giving up our worldly grievances, accepting mistreatment with joy, and actively paying off every single micro and macro ledger we owe, we gain the Tao, the absolute universal truth. The core thesis is a total paradox. By willingly abandoning everything completely, and that includes our pride, our need for justice, our earthly attachments, we ultimately gain everything completely in the spiritual realm. Which leaves us with one final, provocative thought directly from the source text. Society usually looks at people who endure mistreatment without fighting back as foolish or weak, right? But viewing life through the lens of this philosophy, we really have to ask ourselves, have you ever considered that the people society views as entirely passive might actually possess the clearest, most astute, and most brilliant strategy for achieving ultimate spiritual freedom? Something to chew on. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive has given you a fascinating new perspective to consider.